For many Albertans, politics today feels like the American politics of 1775. A year later, the Declaration of Independence was signed in Philadelphia. Americans celebrate this event, but what of us Canadians? The British territory that became Upper Canada in 1791, and eventually Ontario was settled along with New Brunswick by the losers of the Revolution, the Loyalists. Their loyalist instincts remain, as shown by the Ontario premiers pouring out of Crown Royal over American tariffs and the Prime Minister's elbows up campaign. The Declaration says that when a people seeks to dissolve political bonds with another, they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. It affirms that all human beings are created equal, that they have inalienable rights that governments secure but do not create, and that governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed. When governments destroy these ends, it is the right of the people to abolish it. Further, when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing inevitably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such a government and establish a new one. Such is the position of many Alberta patriots today. If today's loyalists find this intolerable, disloyal, or treasonous, it should not surprise us. Consider Canadian history. West of the Confederated Colonies of 1867, centered on the St. Lawrence River Valley, lay the Hudson's Bay Company lands. When they became Canadian jurisdiction in 1869, then Prime Minister Sir John A. Macdonald remarked that Canada now had its very own Crown Colony. By imperial law and practice, a Crown Colony was a possession of the Crown under the control of a governor appointed from the imperial capital, whether London or Ottawa. Even if such colonies had a legislative assembly, the Crown could always veto their decisions and impose direct legislation by order in council. A longtime critic of the company, Alexander Kennedy Isbister, said its lands became a colony of a colony. No one consulted the territory's inhabitants, quite unlike westward expansion in the U.S. Under the Northwest Ordinance, the inhabitants of American territories could petition Washington to become an equal state. The result of ignoring the inhabitants of the Canadian Northwest was evident in 1870 and 1885 when Canada had to deploy a military force to extinguish an armed challenge to imperial rule from Ottawa. Following the completion of the Canadian Pacific Railway and its monopoly, the region remained politically and legally subordinate to Laurentian Canada. Settlement of the agricultural West reserved land sales for the purposes of the Dominion, and tariffs under the national policy protected Laurentian manufacturing from competition. Unlike all other provinces, when Alberta and Saskatchewan were created in 1905, they did not control the chief sources of revenue, namely public lands and natural resources. That didn't happen until 1930. James Mallory, a McGill political scientist, said in 1954 they were provinces in the Roman sense. Ottawa ruled the West as a conquered territory, just like Rome treated Gaul. Laurentians assumed the West and its resources existed to benefit them, whether furs, wheat, potash, uranium, or hydrocarbons. When the Yom Kippur War drove up the price of oil, Ottawa instituted a made-in-Canada price that subsidized Eastern consumers. They called it the National Energy Program, an obvious insult to Albertans. Federal Energy Minister Marc Lalonde said the purpose was to transfer wealth from Alberta to central Canada. Albertans have tried to work for change within the system, but this has proved impossible. During the Great Depression, Ottawa extensively used the powers of disallowance and reservation against Alberta initiatives to deal with economic hardship. Ottawa increased centralization through the War Measures Act, tax rental agreements, conditional grants, and especially the use of spending power. Albertans responded by working first within the dominant national parties, then through third-party balance of power strategies to advance prairie provincial interests. This included reforms such as a Triple E, elected, effective and equal, Senate, that would have introduced federal elements into Canadian central institutions. But the slogan of a generation ago, "The West wants in," never became reality. Since 1961, Alberta has transferred $630 billion to the rest of Canada through equalization. The current rate, about $20 billion a year, works out to around $22,000 for every family of four in the province. Yet Ottawa continues its decades-long attack on the oil and gas industry. The discovery of oil at Leduc, Alberta in 1947 made clear within a generation that economic power and prosperity soon would establish a new political reality. Unfortunately, there was no effort to accommodate the Prairie West. Instead, the position of Quebec in the country became the sole concern of constitutional reform expressed in the 1982 Constitution Act, designed by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau to be nearly impossible to amend. Every effort to change Canada from an imperial organization to a federation has failed, so it should come as no surprise that so many Westerners are ready to leave. As University of Alberta political science professor Leon Craig asked several years ago, if Alberta were currently independent, would it join Canada on the terms it has today? What would be the advantages? Seeing none, why should Alberta stay? The 250th anniversary of the Declaration reminds us that the options contemplated in 1775 in the 13 colonies are still open today in Canada. For many Albertans, independence is not a question of if, but of when. Please like, share, and subscribe if you appreciate this video.